A final song is almost never announced. The crowd cheers, the lights fade, the band walks off stage. Only later does history realize what it just witnessed. In this video, we are not looking at the most famous songs these artists ever recorded. We are looking at the final songs connected to their last major live moments. Some were full concerts. Some were final guest appearances. Some were final vocal moments. But each one became heavier with time. Not because anyone planned it, but because history turned an ordinary set list into a final page. What remains is a final song. A piece of music never meant to be a farewell, but in hindsight becomes a permanent goodbye. On August 9, 1986, Queen stood before a massive crowd at Knebworth House in England. It was the final stop of their European tour. As the set reached its close, Freddie Mercury led the audience through We Are the Champions. When the final notes faded, a taped version of God Save the Queen played over the speakers, and Mercury left the stage. About 5 years passed. Freddie Mercury died on November 24, 1991, from complications related to AIDS. Today, We Are the Champions stands as a permanent victory lap. It wasn't a surrender, it was a declaration of survival, a fittingly triumphant final live note from one of rock's greatest voices. Not every final stage is defined by stadium triumph. On March 1, 1994, Nirvana played Terminal 1 Flughafen München, a venue located inside the Munich airport in Germany. The final song listed in their set was Heart-Shaped Box. Kurt Cobain delivered the vocals, pushing his voice to its limits against the cold acoustics of the terminal. Exactly 35 days later, Cobain died by suicide on April 5, 1994. Looking back, that performance of Heart-Shaped Box carries a heavy, immovable weight. Its lyrics, about feeling trapped and exhausted, take on a profound reality when placed against a musician struggling under the intense pressure of global fame. Decades earlier, another era-defining artist played his final notes in Germany. On September 6, 1970, Jimi Hendrix performed his last official concert at the open-air Love and Peace Festival in Fehmarn. His closing number was Voodoo Child, Slight Return. He pushed his guitar to its absolute limit, sending waves of distortion over the festival grounds. He had only 12 days left. Jimi Hendrix died on September 18, 1970, following a drug-related medical emergency. The wailing feedback of Voodoo Child stands as his final live transmission. Knowing it was the last time he would play in front of an audience, the roaring close of the song feels like a force breaking completely out of the atmosphere. Just weeks before Hendrix played his final set, another unmistakable voice echoed through Harvard Stadium in Boston, Massachusetts. The date was August 12, 1970. Janis Joplin took the stage. Her set list moved through demanding tracks like Tell Daddy, Half Moon, Mercedes-Benz, and Try Just a Little Bit Harder. The band would finish the night with an instrumental closer titled That's Rock and Roll. But just before that, Joplin delivered what would be her last major vocal moment on a live stage. Summertime. 53 days later, on October 4, 1970, Joplin died of a heroin overdose. Hearing her voice wrap around Summertime one final time offers a quiet contrast to the rapid pace of her life. It is a soulful reflection, allowing her voice to rest on a note of pure emotion. Later that same year, the changing decade claimed another monumental figure. On December 12, 1970, The Doors played The Warehouse in New Orleans, Louisiana. As the concert drew to its conclusion, the final song listed for Jim Morrison and The Doors was The End. About 6.5 months later, Jim Morrison died on July 3, 1971, in Paris, under circumstances that remain uncertain. Performing a song titled The End as a final live act feels almost too cinematic to be real. The track is a brooding meditation on finality. When Morrison walked away from the microphone in New Orleans, he left behind a perfectly scripted, yet entirely accidental, curtain call. Some artists faded into uncertainty, while others commanded the spotlight until the very end. On June 26, 1977, at the Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, Indiana, Elvis Presley performed his final concert. As the show reached its close, he sang "Can't Help Falling in Love." His voice, though weary from years on the road, still possessed the deep resonance that changed American music. Elvis Presley died on August 16, 1977, at Graceland, after years of serious health struggles. The time between that final note and his passing was just 51 days. "Can't Help Falling in Love" is a classic ballad of devotion. In hindsight, listening to him sing it that June night feels like a final embrace between a king and the audience that gave him his crown. But a final live moment doesn't always happen on a solo tour. On November 28, 1974, Madison Square Garden in New York City hummed with anticipation. Elton John was performing, and, to the astonishment of the crowd, John Lennon stepped onto the stage. It would become Lennon's final major concert appearance. Together, they played "Whatever Gets You Through the Night" and "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds." For the final song of his featured guest segment, Lennon chose a rock and roll classic, "I Saw Her Standing There." 6 years later, the world was violently changed. John Lennon died on December 8, 1980, murdered outside his home in New York. The tragedy of his death casts a long shadow, but his final major concert appearance remains untouched by that darkness. "I Saw Her Standing There" was the final Beatles-related song he played in that segment. It is a memory frozen in the joy of the music itself. The stage lights always go down. The venues empty out. Every musician, no matter how iconic, eventually plays their final song. But the sound they leave behind? That remains. Long after the silence falls, the music continues to echo. And that is what makes these final songs so strange. None of them were introduced as endings. They were not presented as farewell speeches. They were simply part of a set list, another song before the lights went down. But time changed their meaning. Time turned applause into memory, and a final note into something far heavier than anyone in the room could have understood.